Hello, my name is Johnny Lewis, and I want to thank you for coming to this presentation on FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This is just a review for district staff of the importance of FERPA and FERPA compliance. So first of all, FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law that protects the confidentiality of student information that's held by any public school. It provides parents or adult students 18 years of older the right to prevent the sharing of student records without their consent. It provides them with access to review any student records, and it provides them with the right to request corrections to any student records. And so when we think about FERPA, then we have to ask what information is protected. There is so much data that we keep about our students at school. And so legally, anything that would make the student identifiable to an entity, any information that may be shared with them. And examples of this would be their social security number, student disability or evaluation info, their academic transcripts, their mother's maiden name, attendance and behavior records, any of those sorts of things. And then there are some exceptions to FERPA. School officials who have an educational interest, a teacher or a records clerk, for example, have the right to see educational records that are identifiable. School officials or SROs who need access to records when it's necessary to promote school safety. This could be, for example, in the event of a viral outbreak or a school shooting, anytime that vital records may be needed to be shared with legal authorities necessary for public health and student safety. And then this is an important conversation for us to have as our schools are very diverse. ICE agents, ICE is the immigration the organization that makes sure that monitors immigration compliance. ICE agents or other immigration law enforcement should not be permitted to access students or student data without a valid court order or subpoena consistent with FERPA. In other words, an ICE agent can't just come to your school and ask to see student X because they're suspected of not having the appropriate visa documents, for example. There needs to be a court order and a subpoena. And my suggestion would be in that sort of instance that you contact the district and speak with the district attorney, the attorney for the school district in such an instance. Then there's information that's not protected. This is referred to in FERPA as directory information, and it's not potentially harmful. This is information like what might go in a directory. For example, school photos, so class photos, the height, weight, and names of athletes on school teams, that might appear on school pictures, the years that students attend a school, their address and phone number, or any awards or areas of study. So then we have to ask, what are our responsibilities for sharing protected information? We have to receive written permission from parents or adult students defined as 18 years old, which describes any document that they want to be shared, the purpose of it being shared, and the entity with which it is to be shared. And we have those documents for our district on file. At DeSoto High School, for example, they're on file in the Student Services Office. And so that's who you would talk to about any sort of transfer of document. You would get that legal authorization form to do that. Our district policy, it's very important that district employees, I know it's not super exciting reading, but that they familiarize themselves with Section JRB of the district policy. This is related to the release process, the time of maintenance, and the destruction of records. You can also see the student services folks in each of your schools who are trained on these policies for help or any questions that you may have. Section JRB carefully defines document types, whether documents are considered directory information or not, and the required destruction methods for each of these. Section JRB also provides a timed process for parents and students to deny the release of directory information. And so even if legally under FERPA we may have the right to release information, our district requires that we provide students and parents with the opportunity to block the release of said directory information. And so that's laid out under JRB. And then JRB for our district provides a process for a regular audit of district data, which is conducted by district officers or contracted bodies. Here's how FERPA is enforced. So here's what happens if we don't follow FERPA. Parents, students, or institutions who feel FERPA has been violated can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education. USDE may also self-initiate investigations when they believe that violations have occurred that have not been reported. The first thing USDE would do would be to help a school in question to achieve compliance and to work with them through their issues. In instances where a school is unable or unwilling to achieve compliance, federal funding may be withheld from a public school. And I think this is probably most important for district employees and why it matters so much that we familiarize ourselves with it. Investigations have led to the firing for cause of educators who violated FERPA. And so it's something that we should take seriously. And then these are some additional FERPA issues for administrators. Each of our schools has security cameras. Parents and adult students have a right to access footage that is directly related to their student. And so if an event occurs that, let's say it's a discipline event or a fall or something like that, and a student just happens to be walking through the camera, but the incident is not about them and they're not involved in it, then it's not considered directly related to them. But if the camera footage is going to be used for disciplinary action, if a student is injured or has a health issue, if the footage contains any personally identifiable records, or if it's going to be used for an identifying purpose. If, for example, you're going to use that footage to create, a picture of their face for a school badge, then parents have the right to access that footage and it's considered identifiable information. And then a huge issue for administrators and for districts is related to data vendors and compliance. Our schools compile so much more data than we ever have, and it's not as simple as just shredding it or placing it in boxes the way it may have been a few years ago. We have all of this data that's constantly being connected. We have every student in the building with a MacBook that they have to sign into multiple times a day to different vendors. And so anytime that we are contracting with a third-party vendor, an example of this might be the Canvas system that we use right now, we have to make sure that those vendors have appropriate data protection in place and that any contract we sign with them holds them liable for the breach of data, makes them responsible for it. And then we have to be sure that parents or adult students are aware of and have the option to opt out of any information, publication, surveys in which data is collected, and that includes electronic data. And then as it relates to data, once data is compiled for a variety of different reasons, academic data, logins to how many times a student logged into Canvas, whatever it may be, again, we have to be sure that any third party agrees to destroy data when it's no longer necessary. We need to require certification of the destruction of that data. We don't just need to take their word for it, but make sure that they are verifying destruction. We need to specify the form of destruction, and this all takes place in JRB for our district. And we need to make sure that any hard forms of data, CDs, DVDs, paper is shred, any of those things, that those are destroyed as well. And then we need to create and follow destruction best practices in each of our buildings. And for our district, Section JRB of district policies provides those best practices. And then here's just a few ways that district leaders and building administrators can help us with compliance. One, we need to be aware and raise awareness of FERPA, make sure that everyone in the building is aware of FERPA, what it is, why it matters. We need to know our school data categories, which are listed in JRB. We need to know what's considered directory information and what's considered identifiable information. We need to ensure that we are always choosing compliant vendors and that those vendors are encrypting files and emails. We need to make sure all staff receives training. And we need to implement procedures for FERPA compliance and monitoring. And again, our district has all of those laid out for us in JRB, and they're things that we receive training on as administrators. And then our last point is FERPA for teachers. And so this is kind of where, the day-to-day FERPA compliance happens. We need to make sure that teachers are using only technology that has been verified by the district. One of the issues we run into when we use, a new tool or whatever, but it's not been verified that by the district, we don't know what kind of data they're collecting and how it's being destroyed, and that puts us at risk as it relates to FERPA compliance. We need to ensure that any conversation we have related to students is for an educational purpose. That includes our conversations with colleagues. Anytime we're using a student name, any of those are an identifiable part of a student's identity, we need to make sure it serves an educational purpose. Please avoid personal social media posts related to any students in your classroom, even if you don't identify them by name. Anything about your students, please avoid using that on social media. That's just best practice to avoid any issues there. Please be sure to ensure correct guardianship. Know who parent guardians are, who gets contact information. I know many of you in special education, you may have foster parents who do not have the right to view special education documents, and then you have guardians who live in other towns that you have to contact for meetings, for example. So make sure that you know who the correct guardian is. Make sure that you're sending documents or any other information that you have permission to send electronically, that you have the right address, and then make sure that the phone, if you're leaving a message on a phone, or for example, make sure that you're ensuring that it's the correct contact information. And then, we have passwords on our computers, but just make sure you keep that you follow our district technology use policy, keep your passwords private and protected, and then keep any paper data under lock and key. Thank you for coming to this presentation. These are the resources I used as part of today's presentation. Thank you.